All right, fellow podcasters, this is it. Part 3 of the podcast interview breakdown with Gary Vaynerchuk and Mark Zuckerberg. If you missed parts 1 and 2, that's totally okay. I'll link everything down below. And just like the others, this video is packed with podcast interview tips and podcast interview questions so you can use them for your next interview. Let's go.
We've now lived through a decade where verified accounts, following counts, social equity through visualization. We've seen it with followers and verified accounts, right? The extremity of the NFT space is going to be even greater for what that means. It's almost like our world is all about to become the fashion industry because we communicate so much through what we wear. The digital version of that is going to have an incredible impact on society.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think if we're all spending a lot more time in the metaverse, then I think we're going to care a lot about our representation of our identity, and we're going to want different outfits. And I don't know, maybe everyone except me. I just wear the same thing. But it's
did you steal that from Steve Jobs?
Mark,
Mark, hard-hitting question. Did you steal wearing the same thing every day from Steve Jobs?
I don't think so. I just think I was maybe a little lazy, and then like had some kind of some good articulation of like, oh yeah, this is just about saving mental energy. But I think I don't know. It was never really a.
But you know what's funny, Mark?
It's funny he brings that up because he talks about wearing a gray t-shirt. He's not wearing his gray t-shirt. So I'd be like, Mark, why aren't you wearing your gray t-shirt?
To be honest with you, I actually think that's the punchline. You consciously or subconsciously made that decision to represent yourself. And I think that going digital is going to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
And how are people, if people are going to be spending, this would be a question for both of them. If people are going to be spending time in the metaverse, is that the equivalent of spending time on social media? Because like everybody's going to have a job. It's like you got to go do your job or you got to get work done before you go into the metaverse. Is metaverse time the same as social media time? Like if I spend or if I get lost on TikTok for 2 hours scrolling and before you know it 4 hours goes by, does that equate to what it would be for meta time, if that makes sense?
I really do. I really think that people are grossly underestimating that almost all the things we've been doing are about to get more visual, more collateralized, more obvious, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people realize why they bought a Rolex. I really don't. I don't think a lot of people realize, like, I don't think I overthink why at 45 years old, I look like I'm 13 right now, right? Like, there's a lot going on in that. And I think that when it hits digital, it becomes more obvious. I think a lot of people's conversation about what's going on in digital is actually just showing us what we are much more than anything else. And so I think as we go into the realm of consumerism, is insane, right? Like when you think about how much people buy things to communicate, that going digital and being so in our faces, because so many of these things sit in our homes where 99% of our social graph never sees it, that going to a full 100 is fucking crazy.
Yeah, but I think you're hitting on a number of important pieces here. I mean, first, a lot of people think about this as kind of commerce, and I think a lot of it is actually really expression, right? Which is the core social dynamic. So the intersection between that expression and your identity and then the commerce around that, especially if we can get it to be interoperable so it's a more fluid market, I think is just going to be a really 100%. Big deal. Much bigger than I think people sort of internalize today. The other thing that I think is just really refreshing and insightful to hear you talk about is all the lessons from some of the previous rounds of development. I hadn't really thought before you raised it about some of the early Farmville experiences or some of the stuff from a decade ago. But I think you're right that there is a clear through line, right? Both between the kind of social interactions that people have and the types of commerce. And obviously there's more technology now that can make it more interoperable and that can give people more rights over the goods that they have. And on the AR and VR side, making it so people can feel a more realistic sense of connection. But I think you're right that a lot of these concepts are not fundamentally new. They're sort of the next iteration on kind of just dynamics that are evergreen and that are just always going to be and always have been very important to people in terms of how we connect and interact with each other.
It's my take on what happened when you were inventing. I'm like, oh, people put their kids' school on their back of their windshield to flex. My kid's going to Harvard and might drop out. But like that's what they would do, right? Like they would literally, like we've been doing all these same things. Digital's just exposing truths and scaling truths. And I think the new frontier of 3.0 metaverse is going to take us to a completely different place that I do think Web 2 gave us a slight preview to.
A question for both of them is, will this technology, because let's just say it's in 10, 20 years, when it's in full swing, or when is it going to be in full swing? Let's just say it's 20 years. And if everything is holograms, contact lenses, glass, and we don't have to leave the house, if I wanted to go to a concert and see a band, is that going to be an outdated thing in 20 years? Like no one's going to leave? Or it's like, oh, you want to go see them in person? Or are they even going to want to do in-person things anymore? Because I'm assuming, just to stick with the band, if they're holograms or they don't have to go anywhere. They have to go to whatever sound stage it is in the metaverse and just do their thing. They don't have to tour. They don't have to drive around. They don't have to do anything. So yeah, like, is going out going to be outdated?
Mark, since we only have a couple more minutes, have you thought, do you own any NFTs? Have you thought about buying any? Like, I feel like you're going more platforms. Obviously, you as the executive is platform side metaverse. That makes so much sense. It's kind of like leapfrogging. I understand that cold, especially the hardware software dynamic that I think you've been through the last 15 years. Makes all the sense to me in the world. How about you, the human being? Have you, like, were you a collector? Were you a comic book? Like, did you collect as a kid?
I was pretty into baseball cards.
My man.
So I had that, maybe a few comic books, but more for entertainment than collection.
Understood.
The baseball cards, I was really into that, especially, baseball I think is really like the nerds game.
It's math. You're a nerd, Mark.
It's so
I get it. You love that math shit, Mark. Let's call a spade a spade. But have you jumped into NFT land yet?
Yeah, well, look, I try to use all this stuff, right?
By the way, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know I'm excited. I got to give you this shout out because this is back to the one thing I've always connected with you on, using all this stuff. I don't know if you remember this, but when Chat Roulette came out, which obviously had a 45-minute cycle because at first it was brilliant and then it got weird real fast. Literally the first night, I had multiple people take screenshots because I was early on fan pages and you were on my fan page on Facebook and people connected on interests and you were literally there. And Facebook was already a real company and you were like running a big company. And sure enough, at very late into the night, you were literally clicking around, meeting people randomly. Hey, do you remember that?
You got to use the stuff firsthand, right? It's tough to just have someone explain to you or like write a presentation about what it's like. So I've had some pretty funny experiences over the years trying to use different social products. Like probably one of the funnier ones I think is, at some point I decided that I really needed to understand how dating apps worked. And at this point I was like, I've been dating Priscilla for a long time, or we may have even been married already. And so I was like, look, Priscilla, it's like, just so you know, like I'm going to sign up for some dating apps.
Mark, somebody connecting with the Zucks on Tinder is the greatest thing I could ever imagine.
Yes, I want to know what profile pictures he's using, what's in his bio, how many times people thought he was getting trolled. There's a million ways to go about Zucks on Tinder and other dating apps.
I think it was called Coffee Meets Bagel. They give you one match a day.
Yeah.
And I got this match, and it was Priscilla's friend, and she was getting dinner with her the next night. And I was like, all right. I'm like, Priscilla, just so you know, like this came up. Just heads up. But no, look, I just believe.
You know what would have been awesome? I don't know, or just I already know the answer is no. Or did he ever meet anybody just to mess with him? I think that would have been so crazy.
If you want to be in the game building stuff,
you
really should remain curious and keep using all this. So yeah, on all the crypto work, I try to kind of be involved and experience that. I think there's a lot of parts of the experience today that are still pretty early, right? And I hesitate to say something pejorative like broken, because I think it's I have much more of the attitude of it's just not as great yet as it will be in the future.
That's for damn sure.
Some people they look at something and they're like, oh, this isn't good, but I think part of the art of the whole thing is just figuring out when something is going to be awesome.
They're not historians. Of course, Web3 doesn't work as well as Web2 15 years later. Like shopping carts in 1996 took 3 minutes.
I'm going to interrupt because Gary interrupted. If he can do it, I can do it. I would want both their predictions on when they think that this is going to be full tilt. So then we could clip it, put a date on it, and see who's closer. And since they both have a crap load of money, it'd be interesting to make a bet. $1 million bet. Wow, something like that. All right, that does it for this podcast interview breakdown series. But before you go, if this is your first time on this channel, my goal is to help you grow your network and your net worth with video podcasting. So if you have a podcast or you're thinking about starting one, this free download is going to get you started with interviews. It's my list of the top 25 podcast interview questions that will make you sound like a pro so you can become the authority in your niche. The link is in the description. And if you want to see more of these interview breakdowns, click right here for that video, and we'll see you next time.